So class, before we solve the problems, let's just take a look again at the stock valuation models. In the first case, we have the constant growth model, and that is where the growth rate in dividends is constant. And you see here, we find the price of the stock, P0, is equal to D1 over R minus G. D1 is also equal to D0 times 1 plus G over R minus G. So I want you to always ensure that you have either D1 or D0. If you have D1, then the formula is just D1 over R minus G. And D1 is when the dividend is expected to be paid. D0, on the other hand, is when you have a dividend that has already been paid. So you need to always check and ask yourself, am I given D1 or am I given D0? Based on this formula, we have the total return R. R is equal to D1 over the price, the current price, plus G. Take note that D1 over the price is equal to your dividend yield, and G is equal to your capital gain yield or the growth rate. And based on this, you could also find G, the growth rate, and that is going to be equal to your R, your total return R, minus the dividend yield, D1 over the price. When we're looking at the zero growth model, that just means there's no growth rate, there's no growth in dividends. And an example of that is in preferred stock. You have a constant dividend forever. So you see here, the price of the stock in this case is equal to just D over R. There's no G in the formula. And if you're asked for R, then the formula is just your dividend D over the price. The third model is the non-constant growth in dividends. And that's also called supernormal growth. And that's where you have a certain percentage of growth, usually very high for the first 2 or 3 or 4 years. And then it becomes a constant growth in dividends. So this model takes a look at or uses the constant growth model, and then you discount the future cash flows or the future dividends. And finally, we have the price earnings multiple model. And this one is just using an average PE ratio of companies in the industry called the benchmark PE ratio times your earnings per share. So the price of the stock will be equal to your benchmark PE ratio, usually the average PE ratio for some companies in your industry, times the earnings per share. And this model is usually used when companies do not pay dividends, so you cannot use the previous models. So let's take a look at the problem set. In problem 1, you see that a stock is expected to pay a dividend of 75 cents next year. So notice here, expected to pay. The required return R is 10.5%, and the expected constant growth rate is 6.4%. And you're asked, what is the stock's price? So you see here in this formula, we're already given D1. So the formula just remains D1 over R minus G. And you see your answer here, 1829. Let's take a look at number 2. A stock just paid a dividend of $1.50. So notice in this case that the dividend has already been paid. That is your D0. Your required return is 10.1% and the growth rate is 4%. And you're asked for the stock price. You notice here that you can't just use $1.50 because that dividend has already been paid. So you need to use $1.50 times the growth rate to get the next dividend. And you see, when you do this, you get a price of $25.57. In the third question, again, you have a share of common stock just paid a dividend of $1. That means you have your D0. The growth rate is 5.4%, and the required rate of return is 11.4%. What is the stock price? So again, notice the formula that you use because the dividend has already been paid. That is your D0. So you see here your answer is $17.57. In number 4, you are given the expected dividend of $1.25. Take note, game manufacturing is expected to pay a dividend of $1.25. The price of the stock or the stock sells for $32.50, and the required rate of return is 10.5%. And you're told that the dividend is expected to grow at some constant rate G forever. What is the equilibrium expected growth rate? In other words, what is the growth rate? What is your G? And you notice here, you were given the formula earlier. G is equal to your R, your required rate of return or your total return, minus the dividend yield, which is your D1 over the price. So take note here, you're already given your D1, so we use $1.25. If you were given your D0, you would have to multiply this by 1 plus the growth rate. However, you were given the next dividend expected to pay, so the formula remains the same. And you see here your answer is 6.65%. Let's take a look at number 5. You're told that Reddick's stock currently sells for $35.50. The dividend is projected to increase at a constant rate of 5.5%. So your G is 5.5%. Your required return is 9%. And you're asked, what is the stock's expected price 3 years from today? Take note that there are 2 ways to solve this problem. The easier way, the very easy way, is recognizing that the price of the stock today is $35.50. You're already given the price of the stock. You're told it's growing at 5.5%. And then you're asked, what is the stock price 3 years from today? So this, you could simply use the future value of a lump sum formula to get $41.69. That's the easy and quick way. Or you can use this formula recognizing that if you want the stock price in year 3, it's your dividend in year 4 over R minus G. And take note of this class. If you're asked for the stock price in year 2, it's your dividend in year 3 over R minus G. If you're asked for the stock price in year 10, it's your dividend in year 11 over R minus G. If you're asked for the stock price in year 30, it's your dividend in year 31 over R minus G. So since in this question you're asked for the stock price in year 3, it's your dividend in year 4 over R minus G. But you are not given the dividend. So you first have to solve for your dividend in year 4, right? By finding D1. You know what the price is, right? You know what your R is. and you know what your growth rate is, so you would need to solve for D1. Based on this formula, D1 is equal to 1.2425. So if you know what D1 is and you want D4, it's growing at 5.5%, then you raise it to the power of 3. So this goes way back to chapter 5, guys. Future value. You have the price, you have the dividend in year 1. If you want the dividend in year 4, needs to be raised to the power of 3. So the price of the stock in year 3 is your dividend in year 4, 1.2425 times 1.055 raised to the power of 3 divided by your R, 0.09 minus 0.055. And that gives you the same answer of $41.69. So, like I said, this is much quicker to do it this way. However, you need to recognize that this would also be correct. A little more work, but it would also be correct.